Alrighty, so today we are going to be talking about difficult fights in Dokkan. I think with the Kid Buu Red Zone fight being introduced, I think it would be a good time to sort of talk about these different fights in the game and the different and varying levels of difficulty that they provide, the different challenges that each stage has and stuff like that. And this is coming from the perspective of someone who's no-itemed all of these fights. Not that that's really too much of an accomplishment these days, but I've at least sort of seen, the fights at their hardest when, you don't have any additional assistance. But keep in mind, I've also been using the superheroes team. So it's like global players aren't going to have access to a few of these fights, but they also don't have access to the superheroes team just yet. So don't take the no item as like the be all end all, but at least it shows that I've beaten the fight and also done it without items. So that's just kind of the idea. I've had a decent amount of experience in each one of these. Not every single one, because some of these are fairly new, but what we're going to be doing is ranking them 10 to 1. I just had to toss a 10th fight in here that I could deem hard, quote unquote, because I just wanted the list to be 10, because 10 is better than 9 in terms of a YouTube title. So if you disagree with this list, keep in mind I think this is a pretty fluctuating one, and it could vary from someone from account to account and all that fun stuff. But let's go ahead and get started. So starting at number 10, we have the Buuhan, the new Buuhan Red Zone. I think this fight is relatively easy. The hard part is the damage that you were dealt at the beginning of the fight and then the second phase. But once you get out of that second phase, I feel like there isn't really too much in this that you can't deal with. Now, I suppose slot 3 or phase 3 having a lock can be a bit of a pain in the ass, but it is in turn, it doesn't have that hard of a hitting super. Like we are to the point where 1.4 million really is not that hard of a hitting super compared to the rest of the game. I mean, it's still going to mess you up if you're not ready for it, but I didn't really think that this fight provided too much of a challenge. You could argue it's a little bit harder than some of the fights that are coming up above it, but I figured that this was probably a good spot for it. So, number 10, I have the Buuhan Red Zone, the brand new one, or the Super Buu Absorption. I forget what this one is called. It's like Super Buu something, right? I don't remember, but either way, it's just Super Buu Absorb victims, essentially. So, that's number 10. Number 9, we have Red Zone of Broly. Now, I know what you're thinking. Red Zone Broly, he only hits for 1.2 million. Yes, he only hits for 1.2 million. But there's one thing about this stage. It's pretty simple, right? As long as this phase 3 exists, where there's an AoE that you can't dodge, characters that need to super first are going to have trouble in it, right? So that is the only reason I still have this fight ranked as difficult. You can absolutely still lose in this fight no matter what team you're using. There's probably somebody on that team that can get caught by this phase 3, and then a double super at 1.2 million is nothing to scoff at, or is nothing to laugh at. But again, this fight is definitely easier than it has been in previous years. You could probably argue that the Buuhan Red Zone is harder than this, but I found that the second phase of this fight, was easy to kind of get through. And then once you got through that second phase of this one, it got pretty easy, while this fight progressively gets harder compared to the other one. And then this AoE that you are unable to dodge can be a bit of a tricky thing to get around, and that is why I have it as high as I do. And as high as I do means it's almost at the bottom of the list. So this fight isn't as bad as it used to be, but the fact that you can't dodge any phase during the fight definitely can leave you susceptible to some damage. So let's move on to number 8, and that is the Omega Shenron fight, the Birth of the Shadow Dragons one. Now, this fight, this is an interesting one, I think. It certainly is tricky. 1.4 million on the super is, again, nothing to laugh at. And this second phase here can tend to have a bit of a problem because you want to bring physical units in order to deal with the int boss, right? But this is like the perfect sort of, what's the word, right? Duality of type disadvantage and advantage, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, you have all these physical units, they're going to pimp slap Omega Shenron, but you get to phase 2 against Omega Shenron and you just get lit up by an AoE that he could potentially do and stuff like that. So that is why I have this guy as high as I do. Why is this guy as tricky as some of the other bosses in this? He has I believe he has a double AoE. I don't know why the AoE is not in the second version of this. If I'm looking at the wrong one, excuse me, but I don't think I am. Definitely not, because the first version of this fight, or the first phase of this fight, has attacked or disables dodging, so you're already losing a portion of what you can do. And then the second phase has an AoE and then a pretty hard-hitting super. I don't know why the AoE isn't on Dokkan info, but I'm 99.9% sure there's an AoE in the second phase. And he also can recover his HP. I think this is just a bugged effect or something, but I know that this second phase has an AoE, so those units that need to do their supers first can potentially get caught, and if you get unlucky or if you're running like a category mission, this fight could be tricky. And then in this second phase, he has a lot of HP, he has a lot of AoEs, or he's doing an AoE, he has a hard-hitting super at 1.4 million, he's lowering your defense. Like, this is a tricky fight, right? And the cooldown is only 5, so keep that in mind. So that is why I have this fight up at 8. I think it is harder than Red Zone Broly, just because the last phase is a bit tougher. He hits harder, he has more HP, he has an AoE, and he does have a portion of dodge disabling in the first phase, so that is why I would have this guy where I have it. But moving on, this is going to be the first of the newer fights that aren't the Red Zone Buuhan fight, and that is going to be the movie boss rush. Now, it's not the fact that a lot of these bosses are tough, it's just more of this Broly at the end is where you get a 3 million super attack. Now, this is countered, or this is the argument that you could make is he can do a double 3 million super attack, but you have a lot of room to build up before you get to that 3 million super attack, to the point where you have stackers, you have a revive that's ready to go, you have ghost ushers from somebody like Fat Buu. There's definitely options that you have to get around this guy, but a double 3 million super attack, it's like, and it's not like these guys aren't hitting hard in the beginning either, right? Like, the Cooler's hitting for 1 million, this Android 13 is hitting for 1.2 million, Bojack is hitting for 1.4 million. There are a lot of things going on here. Janemba hitting for 2 million. Like, there are a lot of different ways that you can potentially lose before you even get to Broly. And if you do get to Broly, congratulations, now you have to deal with 2 3 million super attacks potentially. And then you also have the Bojack Red Zone, who still has his gimmick, which is locking character switching. So what you need to do is start worrying about who you're floating off in the 13 phase, so that way you don't get locked with the wrong unit in the Bojack phase. So it's like you have to worry about getting locked, and then you have to get out of that, and then you have to deal with Janemba hitting for 2 million, who could potentially put you in low HP before you get to the Broly portion of this. It's a tricky fight. I definitely think it is... I also just realized I have a placement I need to maybe switch. I'm not sure. I'll think about it. But, yeah, I think this one at 7 is good, because this is definitely a tricky fight. It's a long one, and if you lose, it feels like losing in Battlefield, because you know you probably get another 15 to 20 minutes on your hands doing these fights again. So that is why I have this one where I have it. These initial phases aren't too bad. This Turles phase is always annoying, because it feels like he always is supering the character in slot 1. So if you want to stack somebody in slot 1, I wouldn't recommend that you do that, because it's a good chance they'll be stunned. But let's go ahead and move on to the 6th fight I have on this list, and that is going to be Fusion Zamasu. Okay, I had to cut real quick because I wanted to think about the placements, but at number 6, I have the Fusion Zamasu fight. Now, I think, I still am thinking about this one. I might move this one up to 5 with the fight that I have at number 5, but here's the case that I'm going to make. This fight is really just kind of the phase 1 at this point, where it's the AoE in the beginning. So it's like, do you have the characters that you need on turn 1? Or are your rotations good? If your rotations are bad, you essentially lose. If all of the units you need to super first are in the first turn, you lose, all that fun stuff. So this AoE is extremely toxic, and I don't think it really represents... It does represent how difficult the fight is, but it's also like, once you kind of get the setup that you need, there's not too much that can go wrong, and that is why I think this fight is not too bad, but it is still very difficult, right? The 6th hardest fight in this game is a hard fight, because there's a lot of them now, so... Fusion Zamasu, essentially that's it, but like with the phase 2, you can still get jacked up in that phase 2, but there are a lot of really good STR characters in the game now that can easily put away this guy in 1 to 2 turns. So that is why I have them at number 6. Let's move on to number 5, and that is going to be the Super Saiyan Trunks, the Sword of Hope Supreme Battle Spectacle. Now, why do I have this fight above Trunks, or above Zamasu? Phase 2 has a lock, and phase 3 has an extremely hard-hitting phase. Like, so let's think about this, right? Trunks has a 750,000 attack stat, and then he has a 100% attack raise to his defense, or to his attack when he does his Super Sword of Hope attack, right? So that is going to have a guaranteed 100% chance to stun you. So whatever character is in slot 1, if he does his slot 1 super, you're getting stunned. He's doing a 100%, attack raise to his attack, which is 750,000, so 750,000 times 2. We have a 1.5 million normals coming after this, and the super is hitting for 2.25 million. I have seen this super mess up a 55% beast. Like, it's rare footage that the government doesn't want you to see, but a beast getting jacked up can potentially happen. A beast taking a lot of damage can potentially happen. Now, with this version of Trunks in the 2nd phase, he just has character locking, right? And he can double super at 1.7 million, and he's also raising his defense and stuff like that, and he already has a very high defensive stat, so you have to crit to kind of get through him, and then he also can double super and lock, so I think this Trunks is just doing more and that is why I have him as high as I do. That's why I have him over Fusion Zamasu, because this isn't a fight that once you're out of the first phase, you're good, like it is with the Fusion Zamasu fight. So I think I'm going to keep this one at 5. I think that's my argument for it, but if you guys want to put Fusion Zamasu over, I wouldn't have any problem with that. So let's move on to number 4, and that is going to be the brand new Kid Buu Red Zone. So as you guys can see, Dokkan Info has not translated this quite yet, but you guys will kind of get the idea. This first phase, why this fight isn't higher up on my list, is the fact that you can essentially just nuke it with an AGL character and get out in one phase. You are not forced to go to the phase where your supers get nullified and you are raising his attack as you hit him. So that is literally the only reason this fight is not higher, but 4 is still a very respectable fight and definitely is representative of how difficult this Kid Buu is as a boss. And you can kind of work around the super in the first phase. So that is another reason why I have him at number 4. So that's kind of really all I have to say about the Kid Buu fight. I think that it's an extremely unique concept where you're buffing the enemy by hitting them, and I think that is very cool. I think the strike super nullification might have been a little bit extra considering how many strike super attack characters we have in the game, but it does make for a fun bit of a challenge. But the predictability of the super in phase 1, I think, is one negative factor of this fight. And then we also have the fact that you don't even have to go to phase 2. So that's why I have this one at number 4. If you want to argue it higher, like I said, that's fine. Really, like spots 2 to like 6 are really kind of mix and match. Whatever is harder for you, I could kind of completely understand. So Kid Buu, I have at number 3, or at number 4. Let's move to number 3, which is going to be the Super Buu Red Zone. Now this one is very simple. It's really, if you really just kind of want me to cliff notes this, it's literally just this Super Buu has an AoE super. That's really about it. And I guess he does get stronger as each fight, as each portion of the fight goes on. But it's like you have to deal with the evil Buu, and you can see he is doing 1.2 million, which is not a ton these days, but it's still a pretty hard-hitting super, right? Like it's not the hardest we've ever seen, but I also said that like 1.2 million was a hard-hitting super earlier in the fights or earlier in the video, so 1.2 million is nothing to laugh at. And then he, 60 million HP, all that fun stuff, lowering your defense. But once we get to the second phase, a 1.4 million AoE super is going to be tough. That is a harder hitting AoE super than something like Broly, but at least you can dodge with this character, or dodge this against this Super Buu and stuff like that. So that is one thing that you have working in your favor. But an AoE, I'm always going to prioritize over, just a hard hitting hit, or just a hard hitting boss in one phase. So it's like Kid Buu, he's a hard hitting boss, but he does not have an AoE, and he also has a predictable super in phase 1. So that is why I have Super Buu a bit higher. But again, if you want to argue the Kid Buu is higher, knock yourself out. So coming to the big 2, I'm sure most of you guys knew this was coming. But number 2, I have the second phase of Cell Max, or second stage of Cell Max, which is coming during the 9th anniversary. This is a tricky fight. If you look at the HP, you can see we have 300 million HP that we have to deal with, while he has a base 1 million attack stat and then 5 million defense. And keep in mind that he's also reducing damage from AGL and Super AGL and Extreme AGL types by 30%. So AGL UI Goku has damage reduction. AGL Kid Super Saiyan 2 Gohan would have damage reduction, etc., 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 right? And then this guy, it's just about those first 4 turns, right? If you can get through... If you can get through those first 4 turns, you're good to go, because then you can start debuffing him. But you can see that the least that this guy's going to hit for is 1 million damage with his attack, right? And then the lowest amount on his super that he's going to hit for is 2 million. But like I said, to kind of counter this, this looks like the hardest fight in the game on paper, right? With all these super attack effects. But once you get through that 4th turn, you can start debuffing him. All of these effects go away, so you can start sealing him, you can start stunning him, you can start lowering his attack. So you really can start kind of working through this shield that he has put up, where like this guy looks impossible to beat, just looking at this image right here. But once you kind of get through that, that is where you're going to have a bit of a difference. So that is why I have him at number 2. Very tricky fight, especially with some of these category missions. But number 1, I'm sure most of you saw it coming, is going to be the Blue Gogeta fight. It's pretty simple to me. 2.7 million super attack and an AoE that's hitting for 675,000. It's a harder hitting AoE than what Zamasu has. His super is hitting for almost as hard as Red Zone Broly is hitting. The Red Zone Boss Rush Broly at 3 million. 2.7 million, he has a turn before that with a double super at 2.3 million. The phase before that, he's hitting for 2 million. And you can lower his attack, keep that in mind, but like, look at this, right? This super's hitting for 2.7 million, and then it raises his attack by 100%, which is at 900,000. So these normals are coming in at 1.8 million after that with a 70 million HP stat. He has damage reduction of 71%, doing 12 attacks per turn with 2 AoEs that have 675,000. And I'm pretty sure if an AoE comes after the super, this is going to put this AoE damage up to 1.3, if I'm doing that math right. So 6.75 what's the math on that? It's like 1.35, I think. Yeah, 1.35. Yeah. So 1.35 million, 2 of those AoEs. This guy is doing so much that I don't really see the argument for a more difficult boss than this Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta. So like, if you're planning on fighting him during the 9th anniversary, you're gonna need some of those 9th anniversary characters. And like, keep in mind that like even these phases are pretty easy, but the second phase is still hitting you for 1.5 million. Like, that is nothing to laugh at, right? So clearly you can see this is power crept around Beast Gohan, Blue Gogeta, the AGL UI, and Evolution Blue Gogeta, etc, etc, etc. You're gonna want a revival, you're gonna want items, all that fun stuff. But there you have it, the 10 hardest fights in the game right now. If you guys were listening on the other monitor or something like that, here is the list. At 10, we have the Red Zone Buuhan. At number 8, I have Red Zone Broly. At number 9, I have Red Zone Broly. At number 8, I have Int Omega Shenron. At number 7, I have Red Zone Boss Rush. At number 6, I have Red Zone Fusion Zamasu. At number 5, I have Supreme Battle Spectacle Sword of Hope Trunks. At number 4, I have Red Zone Kid Buu. At number 3, I have Red Zone Super Buu. At number 2, I have Stage 2 of the Cell Max event. And then number 1, I have Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta from the Supreme Battle Spectacle. So, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know down below what you guys think is the hardest fight in the game right now. Does this list suck? Is this a good list? All that fun stuff. But subscribe if you are new, if you want to keep up with all my Dokkan content, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss out when we post, but we do post every day. Follow me on Twitter at Vilify and all that other fun stuff, and I'll see you guys in the next one.